Oh hello, it's time for another Wrongisode. I'm talking TV for the first time and I've got my sights set on Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt. Roll the theme song. Unbreakable, stay alive, damn it. No, my theme song. Whew, that is some delicious 8-bit goodness. Welcome to the show. This is my friend, Context-Sensitive Infographic, or CSIG for short. CSIG will be joining us for today's episode. Hello, CSIG. It likes hats. Alright, before I get into it, just a warning that CSIG and I are going to be discussing plot details, so if you haven't seen the whole show yet, and you don't like spoilers, just click the Watch Later button, and watch this later. Good? Good. Okay, so for context, Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt is the spiritual follow-up to 30 Rock, from that show's creator Tina Fey and one of its executive producers Robert Carlock. And as a show that was originally intended for NBC before they sold it to Netflix, it attempts to straddle the line between half-hour episodic comedy and long-form television. The tone and content of the conceit are clever, although the fascinating transition promised in the theme song is a bit of an oversell. The show intentionally and wisely consistently makes light of its own premise and never gets too philosophical, heady, or dark, despite the fact that Kimmy Schmidt was trapped in a bunker by a madman for most of her adolescent and young adult life. It gives that cartoony Kimmy the sort of cartoony hang-ups that she should have from her cartoony version of a traumatizing experience. It is taken seriously, but the world of Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt is wacky, and therefore it's funny at the same time. The villain is a villain, but he's also John Hamm, who goofily wins over the comically incompetent team of Tina Fey and Jerry Minor in court. These are three comedy pros who take this opportunity to essentially say to the audience, look, these situations are horrifying in real life, but part of understanding tragedy is indulging in comedy's cathartic release. So lighten up, at least while the show is on. The conceit of the show also allows our hero not to have a traditional social orientation. She's innocent, wide-eyed, smart, and not smart at the same time, and usually at the writer's convenience, and she has a reason to question society. Kimmy is the perfect blank slate combined with a determined spirit that so often defines a protagonist. She has a very good excuse to feel as lost and frustrated as we can all feel sometimes, so it's very easy to slip into her shoes. This premise also allows for more dynamic social conversations to happen in response to the show, instead of the show pigeonholing itself by making too many definitive social statements itself. Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt also attempts to take on a Harmonian story circle structure for the entire season. It begins in the bunker, and then she moves into the outside world, where she learns a lot about her inner strength through her experiences in the outside world, and then takes this experience and knowledge back into the bunker, where she is able to both escape on her own terms and bring out information which is ultimately able to send away the villain. But after watching the entire season twice, this arc, or circle, feels neither trite nor particularly meaningful. Maybe this is because so much was set up for season 2, and closing the loop on the story circle of season 1 didn't make as much traditional episodic TV sense. Arrested Development and all that. I'm not sure. Although that did ring true for me when I rewatched the season and discovered that so much of the show is gag-oriented with one-off stories, except in Kimmy, whose stories tend to push the main thread forward. I'm skeptical that a comedy needs to keep this structure in order to remain funny and accessible, which I know needs to be a top priority when you are making something that needs profitability. But with Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, I feel like it's an old habit from 30 Rock that doesn't transfer to this new show quite as well. This awkwardness can also bleed into Kimmy's dialogue, which can become one-dimensional at times, just repeating the joke of, Kimmy doesn't know how things work in 2015. Ellie Kemper is naturally funny, which does help, but she's often left stranded with her lines, especially in the middle of the season. It's much better, I think, when the writers have Kimmy thinking quickly on her feet using her unique set of intellectual resources. Kimmy's face-offs with Xanthippe tend to be particularly strong, as the adversarial nature of their relationship requires them to be at their wittiest and most clever. It's also better when the writers get more creative and start to thread unexpected ways that Kimmy had to survive in the bunker into her responses to everyday questions. Speaking of writers, I couldn't really distinguish between the credited writers' voices during my time with the show. Instead, there seems to be a unified comedic style. Characters get most of their humor from being unrealistically honest. They speak their motivations and prejudices frankly when normally people, especially these people, would not have the self-awareness to do that sort of thing. The comedy style is also the most obvious way in which Kimmy Schmidt follows the tradition of 30 Rock. High-energy incidental jokes are packed in at a mind-numbing pace, and the show is happy to use audio, language, and visual gags at every possible turn. As I mentioned earlier, it is also cartoony like 30 Rock, and it will often dip into a surrealistic premise and then run with it firmly but briefly. These moments to me are more reminders that this is a sitcom universe. Things should be silly and never taken too seriously, even if the premise of a joke is based on something serious. Also like 30 Rock, jokes will often establish a premise and then pull the rug out from under that same premise in a matter of seconds. Anywho, the result, for me anyway, is a very entertaining show that is packed with clever, tightly written jokes with a very funny, talented cast that still doesn't quite capitalize on the potential of long-form television that a service like Netflix is so perfect for. Anyway, I would say the show is worth it just for Jane Krakowski's comedic performances, which are always my favorite at any show that she's in. Also, I'm pretty sure that background Dracula is Bill Hader? Do you guys see that too? Is that just me? Anyway, that's my first pass of the first season of Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt. How do you guys feel about the show? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Somewhere in between? Something different entirely? Let me know via any of these methods that CSIG has so kindly put up on the screen for us. You can also find these details at wrongaboutEverything.ca. And so, from me and CSIG, see you next time. Unbreakable!